Hey guys, I am Kristen Howerton.
And I am Paul Martin.
And we do a weekly political recap. I'm a Republican.
You are?
We've done this so many times.
April Fool's Day,
I'm
a Democrat.
I don't even know what's real anymore. I am a Democrat.
We're confused.
I know.
The nation is confused. The nation is confused.
Yeah.
What does it even mean anymore?
Well, I don't know what any of it means anymore.
Right, because we have things happening right now that are like any other time in the history of the country. There's every single day there is something monumental taking place.
Yeah.
And whether you're Republican or Democrat, as a Republican, we're all really confused.
Well, and today we're going to talk a lot about race issues, and I think one of the interesting things about our current climate in terms of racial tension is how divided it is by political party, which is really curious to me. And by curious, I mean profoundly sad.
Absolutely. And one of the things, I have just so many people that say, how could you be a Republican? And I've said this before, but one of the reasons that I don't want to leave the Republican Party is I don't think one party should have a monopoly on caring about issues like racism. It's just, these should be issues that are just human issues, human dignity issues, not partisan issues.
I completely agree. I don't think this is actually a partisan issue in the least, but we're going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about why there is this political divide. So if you watched the news this weekend, you saw that there was a very large, I mean, it actually wasn't that large. It was about, what was it? I think that they've numbered it at about 100.
Yeah, was it? I don't know.
Less than
I don't know what the
1,000.
number. Oh, was it really? Okay,
Yeah,
I didn't know how many.
It was, you know, I mean, in terms of like the movements that we've seen for Black Lives Matter and things like that, it was relatively small. But for white supremacist gatherings, it was one of the largest in the last 20 years. And it was a group of white supremacists who were very angry that the University of Virginia was removing a statue of General Lee.
Yeah. Will you unpack just, I know people have an idea of white supremacy, of what it means, and they've heard of the KKK, but will you do 30 seconds on what are these people really about?
Yeah, well, it's tough because there's their stated value and then there's reality. And if you were to interview any of these, and there was a man who was at this rally, his name is Peter, and I don't remember his last name, but his face was widely shared. He was one of the ones holding the torch, and he was yelling, and he was in a white polo, and this photo has just gone viral, and he has come out saying, I misunderstood, you all misunderstand us. And so what they would say is, we feel disenfranchised, we feel that our culture is being erased. White people.
Okay, white European. Yeah.
Right. We feel our culture is being erased, we don't hate anybody, we don't want to hurt anybody, all we want is our rights not to be taken away from us, all we want is to be able to celebrate our culture, all we want, yada, yada, yada. We don't hate anybody, but when you remove General Lee, what you're doing is you're removing my culture. You're erasing my culture. Okay.
So that's their best spin, right?
That's their spin.
Right.
No, in reality, these people are just really racist. I mean, you know, when you peel back the layer and when you look at their websites, when you look at their Twitter feeds, you know, when you look at whether you want to call it neo-Nazi, alt-right, white supremacist, these are all, you know, by and large, interchangeable terms. What you'll find is this sort of plausible deniability racist. I'm not a racist, but my Twitter feed is full of crimes that occurred at the hands of people of color.
Right.
I'm not a racist, but I keep talking about how immigrants are going to rape everyone.
Right.
So they're kind of perpetuating a narrative, but it's all this kind of like, but I don't want to hurt black people. I don't want to lynch them.
Right.
I just want to talk about how they're criminals.
Or I have a black friend at work.
Well, they do though. I mean, that's what's scary is, you know, in this day and age, you know, we are not living in the Jim Crow South anymore. Everyone, I think, interacts with people of color, and that's what's so scary is they went underground because you can't behave like this.
Sure.
But yet, now they are creeping up.
Right, right. And I think the other part of it, and I did something on social media this week about it, is just the coming to grips with the matter of fact that this country was founded on the premise of racism. Native Americans. It was. And built on the backs of slaves.
Right.
And many of these, I mean, they were Christians predominantly that espoused this idea that people with darker skin are in one way or another inferior. In the best case, they're not as smart In the worst case, they're 2/3 human,
Yeah.
as we've heard about. But I have trouble with many of my friends getting them just to admit that there is even such a thing as racism. To get what I'm like,
Yeah.
it's either like they're these crazy guys wearing robes, and I'm not that. Therefore, I'm not racist.
Yeah.
But there is a middle ground that's these people are marching about.
Yeah, and what's absurd about what they're claiming, that their culture is being erased, like, white culture is still the predominant culture that we live in. You know, we still live in American white culture. No one is stopping anyone from celebrating white culture. I just spent the weekend in the desert drinking rosé. White culture. You know, we're all still living in white culture. It's so, you know, and if anybody thinks they aren't, they're crazy, you know. And, you know, this idea that their culture is being erased. Let me talk about what cultural erasure looks like. So my son...
Cultural what?
Erasure.
Okay.
My son Jafta is African American. Now, he's adopted, but regardless of whether he is adopted or not, his origins are unknown. His racial origins are unknown. What country his ancestors came from is unknown. And this is not because he's adopted, because I have, you know, the ability to contact his birth family. His racial origins or his country of origin is unknown because his ancestors were brought over here on slave ships, given numbers as names. That is cultural erasure. The fact that I just did a DNA test on my son to figure out that he's actually from Nigeria and Kenya, and that I found that out through a DNA test and his birth family doesn't even know that, that's cultural erasure that most Black people in the United States don't know, you know, African Americans, not immigrant Black people, but African Americans whose, you know, family has been here since the, you know, since in this century, they don't know their origins. That's cultural erasure. And this whole idea that like white people are not able, what they're really mad about is that white supremacy is being erased. That's what they're really mad about.
Right.
They're mad that they're having to rub shoulders with other cultures, hear other languages being spoken. You know, I don't know. Like,
yeah, and the issue with Muslims is just it goes hand in hand.
It does.
Because Muslims are
You're
people
right.
of color, overwhelmingly, 99%. And to me, and there's a lot of theory out there, that Islamophobia, which is really a phobia against a religion, is just racism. Right. It's just, you know, these people are dark, and they're from another country, and they're different, and we don't understand them. But I guess I just wonder, and this is a loaded question because I was once one of the people who thought, hey man, this is America, and it's a free country, and we could all, you know, we all have equal rights. Yeah. And I know a Black guy that became a millionaire. Right. And for so long, I mean, for a good decade of my adult life, I railed against people that talked like you and me.
Well, I appreciate you admitting that.
No, I did. And it was just this idea of, you know, the famous Martin Luther King quote that went something like, once upon a time, a day will come where people will judge you not based on the color of your skin. And that was like, that's our mantra. Like, forget about color of skin. The problem, though, is if you are Black or Mexican or Muslim, and others as well, you're going to be subject to people marching. And I said this on my thing the other day, because someone posted on one of my social media accounts and said, there have always been idiots out there. What's the big deal? And here's the deal with that. I'm an idiot, meaning I make mistakes. We're all idiots. Just ask your significant other. We all are in one form or another an idiot. But Black people never march to put forth an idea that we need to get rid of whites and take their rights away. And that's what this march was about.
And there are a lot of absurd red herrings floating around, and I had a few of them in the comment section of my Facebook page today. Well, you know, there's Black Lives Matter, and that's really what fueled that. So let me talk about Black Lives Matter
the
marches.
new KKK, by the way.
Because I've been to them, and my kids have been to them. They are peaceful, they are multiracial, and they are against violence. Black Lives Matter is an anti-violence campaign about not being violent. And at the end of the day, Black Lives Matter is saying, hey, could less Black people die? Like, could less Black people die at the hands of police officers? It's a completely different thing than a white supremacy march where they're mad because, you know, a racist statue is being removed.
Absolutely. And
it's totally different.
Absolutely. And in a more serious sense, that someone like Pat Buchanan, you might not know who he is, but he ran for president once. He was basically the Donald Trump that came too early.
Yeah.
And he has said outright, and you can go to my blog or go to NPR and Google NPR Pat Buchanan interview, and you will see him say explicitly, and this is a major right-wing political figure saying, America needs to return to its ethnic core, which he says explicitly is European. And the interviewer says, wait, that sounds a little bit funny. And he says, I don't really care how it sounds. We need to get back to what life was like when I was a kid. And basically, it's just this idea. It's almost like a Hitler kind of like, we need to get rid of these people.
It is.
Because they're causing us trouble. And a lot of people think the big problem is the census that was done. And I always forget if it was the 2010 or 2000 census that says in 2042, white people will be in the minority. And there are a lot of people that are just really pissed off about that.
Yeah, and I want to talk about what's the harm. There's crazy people everywhere. I mean, yes, all of that is true. There are crazy people everywhere, but here's the harm. It's not just people getting together and rah-rah fighting. And we saw that this weekend. These people gathered, they're paranoid. Well, first of all, let's back it up. These are also neo-Nazis, and they're not hiding that. They're admitting that. They're marching with Nazi symbols. And if I have to answer for anybody, what's the harm in Nazism? Like, guys, for real. You know, I hope that we all understand the harm in the Nazi regime and how harmful that became. But what we're already seeing is, you know, in this march, there were counter-protesters the next day, which is a really scary reality because I've been a part of a counter-protest the day after a KK rally here in Orange County. But there were counter-protesters the next day. One of the men that was at the march the previous day was so upset about the counter-protesters that he rammed his car into the crowd of counter-protesters and killed someone and injured many more. So,
and he has a history. They've looked him up now, and he is a Nazi. I mean, he is a proclaimed...
So that's the harm. The harm is loss of life. The harm is that these people are angry, they are scared, and they're paranoid. And I will tell a story... I'll tell a story from my own life about the harm of these kinds of people. And I shared this on my Facebook page today, but I hadn't shared it publicly previously because I have been the target of a concerted white supremacy effort.
Now, people, you guys need to listen to this. I didn't know this until I read your Facebook post today.
This is the crazy thing. This had nothing to do with that.
Right.
Nothing to do with that.
Right.
So, backing up, you know, about 2 years ago, I had a bunch of these people get angry with me because I've adopted black children. They attacked me on Twitter. They tried to post my address online, all kinds of stuff like that. And it was really yucky for a couple months there. But you know, they found a new target, I guess. But a couple months ago, I was driving. I was driving in my town, and I live in a suburban, nice,
Orange County,
affluent
California,
area of Orange County. And I was driving. I had been diverted. There had actually been a car accident, and I had been diverted into a residential area. So I was driving a street that I don't usually drive, and I drove by a house that had a white supremacy flag in front of it, and I recognized the symbol, and I was like, oh my gosh.
And what is that flag?
It's black, and it's got like a circle with a cross in it.
Right, yeah.
And actually, I wasn't 100% sure.
Right.
It was one of those moments of like, is that flag?
Can't be, yeah, maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I did what I do when I see things that I can't believe, and I got my camera out. So I'm driving in my minivan, get my camera out, go to take a picture of this flag, and I don't see that the homeowner is working on his car. So he stands up, he's in full army fatigues, up to his hat, in combat boots, he reaches into his pocket, pulls a gun at me, and tells me I'm gonna fucking die today. And I mean...
Did he, like, walk toward you? Or?
Oh, fully. Walked towards me with a gun pointed at me.
My God.
So I speed off. Yeah, totally. Speed off. Like, holy crap, that just happened. Called the police. They came and met me where I had parked my car. They let me get in the back of a car that they had kind of specifically for this purpose where I could see out, but no one could see me. And so I'm sitting in the back. They drive to his house. They pull him out. They arrest him. And then they have me identify him, but he couldn't see me. So this is not someone who was any part of that concerted effort. He doesn't know I have black kids. He doesn't know I write and talk about race. He was just so threatened by a woman in a minivan taking a photo of his racist flag.
Right.
And that is the tenor of these people. They are paranoid. They are angry. They work themselves up into this idea that they are being disenfranchised. They believe that they are a oppressed people.
Sure.
And that's the harm. This is a guy. These are not safe neighbors and people who just have different viewpoints than you.
Absolutely.
They are paranoid. They are gun owning. They are violent.
Yeah.
And they're working each other up online.
Totally. And I'm a late adopter to this whole thing. Although much of what fuels me is both my mother is an Italian immigrant telling stories about being made fun of for being Italian and being Catholic, and my father being Mexican, remembering the segregated school that he had to go to. But just a couple years ago, my son, I ended up seeing a text thread of these kids at this very posh Orange County private school. And there was a thread with like 6 kids. One of them was a ringleader, and he was a Nazi.
Yeah.
He was a full-blown Nazi.
Yes.
I read this stuff. There were swastikas. There were German sayings that were pro-Hitler. He talked about Jews. He talked about black people. And there was one ringleader and maybe 3 or 4 other guys that were kind of going along with it. They ended up expelling that kid, and they came down hard. But I just remember thinking, wait, this is right here in the OC.
Yeah.
I called the Anti-Defamation League just to ask them what to do, and they said this isn't new. We get calls like this every single day. I just want to read a couple things today that I read on Twitter. This is a lady named Katie that said, "My father, a World War II Navy vet, called me yesterday crying, quote, I did not enlist and fight for the USA to see Nazis marching in American cities."
Yeah.
And then someone else said, "Imagine being a World War II vet who stormed Normandy and tore down Nazi banners, only to see, quote, patriotic Americans, unquote, toting swastikas."
It's disgusting. And that, to me, is why this is not a partisan issue. We should all be absolutely disgusted at any kind of a throwback to the Nazi regime. And I do want to say, because I just think it's important to note that the girl who lost her life by the guy ramming his car into the crowd, she was a 32-year-old. Her name is Heather Hare. And she was just an ally. She was a person who lived in the area, who heard that this had happened in her town, and who came out to be one of the many who wanted to stand up and say, not here, And my heart goes out to her family, and I just want to kind of acknowledge that she really, at the end of the day, she literally lost her life because she, went to kind of put her body on the line.
Yeah.
And that I just think that is like really devastating if you really think about that. But she was literally killed by this is domestic terrorism.
Absolutely. It is terrorism. And this is off the cuff, but I want to say to my Republican, conservative, right-leaning friends, guys, this is not a left issue. This is not a progressive issue. Most 99% of you who voted for Trump or who are lifelong Republicans, you agree with me. You have children, you have coworkers, you have neighbors, and you do not think it's right that anybody should be discriminated against in this way. And it's only a tiny, sick fringe of this country that believes this. And I'm just saying that the people on my side, on the Republican side, like Paul Ryan did, like even Jeff Sessions did, like most Republicans did, we need to say enough is a effing enough with this racist business.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to speak to what you said about like you finding out that this happened in Orange County, at your kid's school, and this, I had a gun pulled on me by a crazy person here in Orange County. The internet is the Wild West now, and so this is no longer a regional thing. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe there are regional differences, and the KKK had a rally out here. I believe it was 10 people. Right. It was significantly smaller than what happened in Virginia, but they're still here. And there are people who are sort of on the fence. People reading Breitbart. People who. The Daily Stormer. These are alt-right publications that a lot of people read.
Alt-right, again, what does that mean? A lot of people don't even know what it means.
Well, let me say, so the alt-right is an alternative, far-right movement, and they are nationalistic. They are pro white interests, they would say that they're not racist, but like the Daily Stormer, which is their kind of main website.
So like dailystormer.com or something?
Mm-hmm, yeah. I believe so. And that was one of the sites where they had kind of coalesced and come against me. But they were writing about this event, and basically, they were saying, like, we think that Trump, and this is, we're going to move into talking about why some of us are saying that some of this leads back to Trump, or he bears some responsibility. This is what they said the day that this happened. They said, Trump's statement, he didn't denounce us, and he said that there's hate on both sides, which is what Trump said. And they basically thought that Trump's messaging was a signal to them.
So the alt-right people thought that Trump's statement on Saturday was a direct message to them saying,
there's hate on both sides. He didn't...
I'm for you guys.
Because he didn't particularly denounce them. Now, I will say he did do that today in a statement. He said the word KKK. He said the word white supremacists. He didn't say alt-right. But, backing up, it's important to note that Steve Bannon was the editor of Breitbart, which is the preeminent alt-right publication online.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. If you haven't seen their stuff, guys, scroll back.
And Steve Bannon is still his
senior strategic advisor.
Guys, let that sink in for a minute. So when you wonder why some of us are connecting Trump to what happened, the alt-right is these are all the websites. Breitbart, Daily Stormer, these are where they congregate.
Yeah.
And while Steve Bannon may, again, it's all plausible deniability, say, well, I didn't write those articles, or, well, I can't control what they do in the comments. Here's the thing. When you're the leader of a movement and your movement gets wonky, you denounce that.
Right.
When shit goes sideways, you denounce it. And, let's take it back to Jesus, right? When Christianity got sideways, or, it wasn't Christianity at the time, but when, the Jewish leaders in the temple got sideways, he denounced it. And he spent a lot of time talking about what was wrong, with the religious leaders of his day. Jesus did that. And whatever movement you're a part of, I will say, like, even for myself, not that I think I'm a leader in the adoption movement, but I know that I have a lot of adoptive parents who read my stuff. And while I'm extremely pro-adoption, I have to talk about adoption ethics a lot. And when I hear about people doing things that are unethical, I will call it out, because I know the people are looking to me and listening. And Steve Bannon knows that he's the leader of this alt-right movement, and he doesn't denounce racism.
Right.
And then you have Trump, who chose one of these people as a chief strategist.
It's the highest level advisor.
Who throughout his campaign failed to denounce the KKK, who took endorsements from David Duke. If some crazy racist person wants to, throw me a bone on my blog, I would be like, yeah, no thanks.
Totally.
And he doesn't denounce these endorsements.
And this is one of the things that I think is really nuanced. I had a chat with a good friend of mine today, and listen to me, Republican friends, again, because Trump is not like Hitler and coming out and saying the final solution, right? This is what I think is so critical.
Yeah.
Most of what's happening, I believe, in the racist and xenophobic, which just means fear of foreigners, basically, with Trump is very nuanced. It's subtle.
Yeah.
It's not Trump coming out and saying, I want to get rid of black people. He couldn't do that. He would be gone. He would be dust.
Right.
The Republicans would impeach his ass in a second. But what happens is this. Saturday, there's this rally, and he comes out, and he says, basically, both sides need to stop their bigotry. Both sides. Like,
what's the other side?
Yeah, what's the other side? People that are saying, hey, this is wrong. These people that want to discriminate are wrong. And so he has this way, like you said, during the campaign, where he was asked by Jake Tapper on CNN about David Duke and the KKK, and he said, well, I don't really know who they are, and I don't really know who David Duke is.
I'm sorry.
I don't want to make comments.
Education,
right.
I know who David Duke
I don't want to make
is.
comments on movements I don't know anything about, the KKK. And people revolted, and then 2 or 3 or 4 days later, he had to come out because of political pressure and say, I denounce them. Well, what happened this time is that on Saturday, he gave some milquetoast, vanilla, bland rebuke of this thing. And then the political pressure, both obviously on the left and on the right, got so insurmountable that he had to come out today and read off a teleprompter that, this is bad. But what's interesting is this. Whenever Trump doesn't like something, he will tweet in effing 15 seconds. Like today, the head of Merck, the largest pharmaceutical company, I think, in the country, decided I'm off President's Economic Council Forum, whatever it is. And Trump tweeted within like 15 minutes of this guy putting out a public statement saying, I can't do this with you no more, dude. Within 15 minutes, saying the guy's a loser, basically, and he needs to like lower drug prices. And so Trump, we all know, whether it's the mayor of London, whether it's flipping, Rosie O'Donnell, whether it's Mitch McConnell, whether it's any opponent, he will tweet in a New York minute, no pun intended.
Over and over.
Over and over again. But on this issue on Saturday, he said nothing except some middle of the road, we're against kind of division, and it's only today 3 days later.
3 days later and after somebody had to die.
Yeah.
Somebody had to die. And, if he would have denounced, the thing is, he should have denounced this. This shit should have been shut down as soon as he was elected. He should be on Twitter denouncing white supremacists.
But it's his base, and he knows it.
It is his base. And
a good part of his base.
There's a quote from Steve Bannon that literally says, we're not going to deal with that because it doesn't play well.
Yeah.
And I personally feel that he has fueled the fire, because when you look at the alt-right, their Twitter accounts, because I'm very familiar with them, because, I had about 1,000 of them tweeting at me per day for a period of time, every one of them is a Trump supporter. Okay? Yeah. So they think that he has their interests in mind. They really believe that. They believe that he is sitting on the throne ready to usher in a new reign of white supremacy.
Well, and David Duke literally said that. And I don't know what the exact quote was in the last 2 or 3 days, but Trump ushered in this, they believe he's their savior.
So, I want to say this to anybody who actually still likes Trump and is watching this. Why aren't you asking him to be more clear on this denouncement? These people should hate Trump or whoever our president is. Whoever our president is, they should be super clear that he is not here for them. And they're not. They're sure that he is. So he's off message, big time. If you think he's not a racist, he's way off message, and you need to ask him to be on message. Really.
What does that mean, off message?
Well, he has tweeted more about Hamilton than he has about, not liking the musical Hamilton than he has about racists.
Yeah.
He doesn't respond to it.
Yeah.
He's not talking about it. Not until somebody dies, and he had to do that.
Yeah, so again, a conversation with a good dear friend of mine today saying, well, Trump denounced it, and here's the problem. For my Republican friends, or people that think we're all hot and bothered over, insignificant issues, people don't believe him. They just don't believe him. He came out and made this statement. So you need to hear me, people on the right. Trump read from a teleprompter today a speech that was written by somebody else.
Yeah.
Most pundits smart people think he had to do it because there was so much pressure from Republican senators, leaders, House members, that he had to do something. And so he comes out and he reads a statement. But what does Trump really think? And it was interesting, after his speech, which started about the economy, and that's another big no-no. You don't go address a national social ill, like someone getting killed by a Nazi, with how great the economy's doing, and then dovetail into, oh, and by the way, we're really sorry about this. But the people on the left, the minorities in this country, and many people on the right, including myself, we really don't think he is honest. I don't think he's that upset. I think it was political expedient for him to go make the statement today.
Well, I'll tell you what I think.
Tell me.
I think he's just a puppet for Steve Bannon at this point. I think what Trump cares about is his own wealth and whatever will get him what he wants. So, all of it, I think, at the end of the day, is just Trump looking out for his own interests, his own financial and familial interests. And I think he thinks that this is the way to do it. Mm-hmm. And Steve Bannon is in his ear. I think he's a puppet for Steve Bannon.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pressure on Bannon right now to resign or for Trump to fire him.
I mean, I feel like, and it's super interesting when you look at the revolving door of Trump staffers.
Yeah.
That Bannon's still there. He's like the last man standing, practically.
Yeah, he is. And with Trump hiring Kelly as his chief of staff, it wouldn't be surprising to see Bannon go.
Yeah. I hope he does.
But the problem is, and the experts on Fox, I don't care if it's Fox or CNN, whatever, have said for 2 years, I don't care who Trump has as his advisor, Trump will be Trump.
Yeah.
And so he's had General Kelly for 2 or 3 weeks, and look what Trump has done in 2 or 3 weeks. He ripped into an African-American head of Merck today. He was saying this ridiculous, outlandish, sophomoric stuff about North Korea. We're going to blow you off the face of the earth like some bumbling idiot. It doesn't matter who he puts around himself. And like Trump said in his book 20 or 30 years ago, what was it? I forgot the quote. Like, all publicity is good.
Yeah.
He knows
there's
that
no
the
such
more
thing as bad press.
Yeah, there's no such thing as bad press to the degree that he says something that will grab a headline, he will say it.
I completely agree. You know, I watched a little clip today, too, of the Fox News coverage of this weekend, and it was really appalling. The apologists of these people and the continual circling back of like, but black people do it too, but say both sides. I mean, I am so disgusted. I haven't watched Fox News in a very long time, but it is reprehensible for people to gather around white supremacy and to compare it to the Black Lives Matter movement. It's so absurd. It's so completely absurd. I go to every Black Lives Matter event I've ever been to. I've been welcomed. You know, a black person couldn't have walked into that march this weekend.
No.
You know, Black Lives Matter is not about putting black people above white people. It's about saying, can we not be shot at such a great rate? That's what it's about. It's about safety and nonviolence. And it is black people, white people, children, women marching together. This was a group of there were no children, no women.
No, these are just a bunch of crazy
yeah.
white
and just to,
male.
I mean, the comparison and to just keep, but also the red herring, you know.
What does that mean, red herring?
Like, well, just, it's diversion. It's a diversion. Let me
like find this one example of
Let
something.
me throw this in to like, you know, I mean, why can't we just talk about like, oh, wow, that was really bullshit. That was really horrible. That was really sad. That was really violent. That was really crazy. And instead, they're spending their time trying to create false equivalencies between this, like, they're defending it. I mean, they're defending it. And the other red herring I kept getting today, which, I mean, when you have to fight against an atrocity by creating diversion tactics, there's something wrong with you, and it's stupid that I'm even having to answer for them. But a lot of people are saying, you know, why weren't you as upset because Obama would not directly denounce radical Islam? Because a lot of people, you know, back in the day were very upset that Obama wouldn't specifically say, I denounce radical Islam. Here's the deal. We'll just dismantle this red herring for a minute. Obama had to be super careful because what he was concerned about more than making a statement was our nation's safety, right? And when you start denouncing on big news programs an entire religion,
1.6 billion people,
you start pissing people off. And then you piss them off to the point where the people who are radicalized, much like the people we saw marching this weekend, do crazy shit, right? And so what he's doing is trying to protect our interests against foreign terrorism. This is domestic terrorism. This is not a foreign country that we're, you know, this is our own. He is their president. And so it's a totally different thing to kind of play around and try to figure out how, you know, to be like a good diplomat in the midst of this kind of a thing, which is what Obama had to do, versus with Trump, where he's directly dealing with people who live under his rule. There's no threat that they are all of a sudden going to like rise up and create a war with us because they live in our country. So it's just an apples to oranges comparison.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of Twitter conversation right now going on about why do we not call these white people, and we haven't even talked today about the white guy that tried to basically mimic Timothy McVeigh in Oklahoma City today with a 1,000-pound bomb that he had packed into a van. And now the FBI was working with him for a month. He didn't know that. And he was caught red-handed. And number one,
thank you, FBI.
Thank you, FBI. But number one, where is it in the news? Number two, why are we not calling him a terrorist? And number three, what if he was a Muslim?
Because terrorists have a different skin tone. There's literally like a paper bag test.
Yeah, it's just a matter of months before this guy is diagnosed with a mental illness.
Yeah, I know, he's just mentally ill.
But every Muslim or black person that commits a crime is either a thug or a terrorist.
Yeah. The white guy that plowed into a young woman because she was a part of a counter
more than
protest.
one woman, like
you're
a whole crowd, right?
Killed one woman,
right? 19 or 20
into a crowd. That's a terrorist act.
Yeah,
that is domestic terrorism
by definition.
Yeah, and he hasn't called it that yet either.
Yeah,
yeah. So
and he hasn't really, yeah.
And these are hate groups.
So I just think. Here's what I'm finding as I walk down this road. I think more Republicans are in agreement with what we're saying, but they don't know it yet. And I know that's okay.
Yeah, but I'm troubled by, it's still, even with this event, which I feel like we should all be able to agree. I mean, it's like saying, like, I hate puppies. Like, can't we all agree that it's wrong? What happened this weekend was wrong. And yet, the voices speaking against it, and loudly, are the ones who tend to post about more liberal things and hold more. I mean, I think I don't know if it's that they're embarrassed or they don't know what to say, but I don't know. My Republican friends are awfully quiet right now.
Well, yeah, and I did, again, referencing a conversation I had with a friend today. He did say that, well, the counter-protesters showed up to fight, so they were just as bad.
No, they didn't. I mean, no. They didn't show up to fight. I mean, if you look at the footage, they were holding flowers and holding peace signs.
Yeah, and maybe, I mean, who knows? He showed some picture, which is, I don't know if you could verify where it was from. But here's a part where I, just as a human being, if I was black, I would be pissed. I would have a chip on my shoulder. I would be angry. I would be livid. And if you think I'm an activist now, because my people were lynched. Yeah. Just in my lifetime, lynched like dogs, like animals, and they weren't allowed to vote in my lifetime. And so many of my friends on the right, there's like a lack of empathy or something. Like, wait, if it was you and your grandmother or your father wasn't allowed to flipping vote because he was, quote, 2/3 human, and your uncle was lynched and there were segregated schools, wouldn't you kind of be a little bit pissed off? And it's just like there's this dazed look of like, I don't know, man, people just need to we all have the same freedoms. We don't. No. There's baggage, people.
Well, right. And, even modern day, if you were concerned every time your black male teenager left the house,
which you are. I
am. And you're having talks about what you do if you get, if a cop sees you and the words you say out of your mouth and where your hands go. And, it's... Yeah, I mean, I definitely think black people have a right to be angry, and I have to say, I think that, given everything they've been through, I think it is so absurd. Like, black people, the idea that the Black Lives Matter movement is even the same. Black people have been so peaceful through all of this, I mean, and the leaders have been so peaceful, and... I don't know. I mean, I just feel like if white people had all of that thrust upon them, they would just be like losing their shit.
Yeah, but I could hear a lot of people on the right saying, "Well, but look at the riots and look at what happened in whatever the most recent protest by black people who ended up throwing bottles or rocks into windows, and they'll use that." Example of anger. And when I see that, yeah, there's some of me that thinks, come on, guys, get it together. And many black leaders in the Senate and the House and even President Obama would say, hey, guys, violence isn't the way. But again, I would be pretty pissed if it was me. But I'm a white, educated, Christian male living in the United States of America. I've never had 1 ounce of discrimination against me. And so,
Yeah.
and to many of you who are like me, privileged is the term. Many of you don't know what it means, but it just means you've never been a woman or black or a minority or an immigrant or a Muslim, and you've never had a situation where you've been on the bottom rung. And you just, we have to understand that there is this baggage. And for Muslims, I think it's actually the worst, because they are the most misunderstood people on the planet, with 75% of Americans think they should be banned from this country, white evangelicals, and 99.9% of them are no different than you and me.
Right.
They're just people trying to live a good life.
Right.
Anyway.
Often very devout. Yeah. Well, and I think, just to kind of close, I think it's really difficult for white people to look at the events of this weekend and consider what that feels like for people of color, or for Jewish people, to like watch all of this go down.
Yes, for Jewish people.
And how alienating and how scary it must feel for Black Americans, Muslim Americans, Jewish Americans to watch these people gather with such fury and such,
unashamed. They're unashamed.
Yeah, and the optics of the fucking fire, like, that shit looked like something from, a movie.
Yeah,
from
it's ugly.
Yeah. And just, I just think it's really important for white people to step back from all the pontificating and arguing and just really think about what that must feel like to our fellow Americans who are, really, who are not white and who are the target of these people's anger, to the point where they're going to drive and come to a rally and yell and scream and carry around what looked like, torches.
Right. And I love that you say pontificate. And I just one of my favorite songs in the world is a Bob Dylan song. And in one line, it's called The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll. And he says, "You who philosophize disgrace and criticize fear." And to the white people, this is all philosophy.
It is.
It's all pontificating and philosophy and political opinions and reading this website. And I heard but with no sense. And you get it, because you have black kids. And,
well, I don't know.
But to a degree greater than most people. And I only do because of access to my father, who was a dirty Mexican, and was called that term. And my mother, who was a dirty wop and a dago. But to the privileged white people this is all philosophy.
Well, I think there's a lot of white people who are righteously indignant.
Yeah, there are some.
But it's because racism upsets our sense of decorum. It's like, oh, we don't like that. Like, we don't want to see it like that.
Right.
We don't want to see racism like organized and like photographed.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it upsets our sense of decorum, but I don't know that all white people are really able to then take what happened this weekend and carry it back down the line.
Sure. And
see how all of the systemic stuff is fueling this, but also really try to imagine, how this feels for our fellow citizens of color.
Right. Okay, so should we talk about our two names, our finalist names, or do you want to do that next time?
We'll do that now. Okay, so in a very awkward record scratch. Okay, so that's a wrap for today. But we do want to discuss, so we've been talking about this, we're shifting to a podcast, which we hope you will all tune in and listen to if that is preferable to you.
We're going to do both, though, right?
We're going to do both, so we'll still be live on Facebook, so you can come in and comment, and we hope you'll engage with us here. But we are also shifting to the podcast so that you can listen to it in your car. I know I prefer podcasts to Facebook Live videos. So in our shift to do that, we need to find a name. So we have a few names we have been bandying around. One of them is Why Partisan, so a play on words, because we are both coming from different parties.
Not bipartisan,
so
but
not
why
bipartisan, but why partisan, because we are talking about so often why things are a partisan issue and whether or not they should be. So that's one that we have talked about. Another was Politics Cocktail Hour, because we do tend to talk for about an hour and we're usually drinking. What were some of the other ones?
So
Politics on the Rocks.
And again, denoting
Yeah.
politics, which has gone effed up in the last
Yes.
couple of years on the rocks and on the rocks.
What else?
Just politics.
Just Politics. We the Podcast. Keep It Civil. These are some of the ones we've looked at. So anyway, if you guys have feedback for us on any of those names, Why Partisan, Politics Cocktail Hour, Politics on the Rocks, Just Politics, Keep It Civil. If you have any feedback on those, please let us know. We want your opinion. We want to choose a good name that hopefully will, engage a bit of a new audience. In addition to, just wanting to hear ourselves talk. The genesis of this really was Paul and I wanting to model civil discourse for people who come from different sides. And so, we absolutely are hoping the podcast can take this a little wider, and that people will tune in and begin to think maybe shift a little bit more towards the center and be a little more civil in their conversation. So
there are just so many issues to talk about.
I know.
This is a time, I've been around for a while, and there's never been a time like this. And so we're excited to just share more. We come from different sides, but we agree on a lot. And we're all in this together.
Yes, I agree. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in.